Hey, what's up guys, TechTime here, and this is my comparison between the 2026 Moto G and the Samsung Galaxy A17. And basically these phones will shape up the rest of the budget market. So these are almost, think of it as your startup budget smartphone. So both of these have an MSRP of around $199. They do have similarities, but they do have also big differences. So the price obviously is the first similarity, but as far as the design, they're apart. So they each have their own aspect when it comes to the design. Beginning with the 2026 Moto G, it gives us the same vegan leather material that we're used to from Motorola. And honestly, this gives, still to this day, gives this phone a sleek look and almost inexpensive look without the phone being expensive itself. So as far as the durability of the material itself, it's alright. It's not the greatest, but it actually functions very well for the most part, and it will last you for a very long time. Now the sides of the phone is made out of plastic, and that's honestly to be expected, so that way you keep the phone at this price point. Now the display is honestly one of the most disappointing things about this phone, but we'll talk about that later on in the video. And to this day, this is one of the rare phones that still gives you a 3.5mm headphone jack, and also still gives you a 30 watt of fast charging speeds. Now moving on to the Galaxy A17, Samsung has been really not changing that much in terms of design these past couple of years, but you still get the matte finish on the back that is very slippery. It doesn't catch fingerprint like the previous generation, but it is very slippery, so you keep that in mind. The camera cutout does look different, but you still get the same sort of the side hump that leads to the power button, fingerprint sensor, and the volume up and down. For the most part, Samsung did not really change too much. The design is almost kind of boring. Now, obviously, the design itself is such a subjective topic. It's basically whatever you're into. Me personally, I do lean a little bit more towards the Moto G's design versus the A17. Now, as far as IP rating, they both have the same IP54 rating, so it's it's not water resistant, but it's water repellent, so it can withstand rain and things like that. So yeah, for the most part, that's your story behind the design of both the Moto G and the Galaxy A17. So I do want to move on to the display, and this is such a huge difference between the A17 and the Moto G, and we'll talk about that because there's a clear winner. It's not really subjective, it's objective. Okay, so beginning with the Galaxy A17, it provides one of the best displays that you can get under this price point. So it's a 6.7-inch Super AMOLED display, Full HD plus resolution, which means that you'll get sharper text, more vibrant colors, and it also has a standard 90 Hz refresh rate. It may not be the 120 Hz that you see in a lot of flagships and even higher mid-range devices, but for the most part, the 90 Hz refresh rate is something that is a good addition. It also gets brighter than the previous generation, so it gets at 800 nits of high peak brightness, which is relatively good for the most part. Now the bezels may be on the larger side, but I'll give that a pass given the resolution. The Moto G, on the other hand, is one of the most disappointing displays that you'll get as far as this price point goes. So it's again a 6.7 inch, but instead of an AMOLED display, you get an IPS, which is not the end of the world. However, you only get a 720p panel here in 2026. They did that for the 26 generation, 25 generation, 24 generation, 23 generation, so on and so forth. So the display has been untouched. Now, they did add a 120 Hz refresh rate, but given the low resolution, I do have to say that the 2026 Moto G is a letdown display. Now, if we look at it from the performance side of things, without getting too technical, both the Galaxy A17 and the Moto G share a similar performance. There are some slight differences, but nothing too dramatic. So on the Galaxy A17 side of things, it uses the same chipset as the previous generation, and even if you go to synthetic benchmarks, the single core gives you 825 and the multi-core gives you 1986, which is very, very similar to the previous generation. So performance hasn't really changed all that much. You do get Android 16 as far as the software update, so you will be getting a little bit longer software support than the previous generation, but other than that, still 4 gigs of RAM, which with all AI stuff is just not it. And that goes to the Moto G as well. So if you look at the Geekbench, it's 753 and 1924. So slightly lower than the Galaxy A17, but as far as the daily tasks, the 3D intensive tasks, they're going to be the same. I do have to give it a little bit to the Moto G because it does have, one, a faster charging speed, two, a slightly larger 5200 milliamp hour battery versus the 5000 milliamp hour battery that is found on the Galaxy A17. But both of these phones will have similar software support. Okay, so that's basically it for the performance. Very similar, not too much of a dramatic change. If we flip the conversation and talk a little bit about the camera, then my pick for this one would be the Galaxy A17, and that is because a couple of things. One, obviously both of these phones will have the same 50 megapixel sensor. However, the pictures that the A17 takes are slightly better. In addition to that, the Galaxy A17 does add an ultra wide versus just a standard macro sensor and no ultra wide on the Moto G. So that's also something to note. And I do have to say that the video is slightly better on the A17 versus the Moto G. So if we're looking at it from a camera perspective, I lean a little bit more towards the A17, but it's not, again, a dramatic difference. So keep that in mind. All right, so as far as my bottom line conclusion, here's what I have to say. If I were to pick and choose which phone I would get if I only have the A17 or the 2026 Moto G as an option, I would honestly go with the A17. The reason that is, while the Moto G does have a sleeker design, the Galaxy A17's display makes up for a lot of things that the Moto G has as far as the pros. Does it have a bigger battery in Moto G? Yes. But the battery life on the A17 is no slouch. So the camera experience is also, again, a little bit better on the A17. And overall, though, from a functionality perspective, I'd still pick the A17. If the Moto G had a 1080p display, even if it was an IPS panel, I would pick it. But because of that lackluster display, I really feel like the Galaxy A17 is the phone of choice. Now, I do also have a little bit of a side rant, and that is this. The A17 and the Moto G are incremental upgrades from their previous generation. So if you do have either the A16 or the 25 Moto G, I wouldn't even jump the gun and upgrade to either of these phones. I think more options and better options will come as the time goes on, or you can even get older options for a similar price point. So with that being said, I do want to hear your guys' thoughts on these devices. Do you think that they're worth it? They're not worth it? Which one would you pick if you had an option? So let me know. Leave it in the comments below. With that being said, I do want to thank you all so much for watching, and I will definitely catch you guys in the next one. A lot more fun videos are coming soon, so stay tuned and make sure you're subscribed. Thank you all so much for watching.